In a world of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And now, your host, David Knight.
Welcome back. We didn't have enough time to get in the comments that Vladimir Putin had said in April. And just understand this sequence here. In April, Putin talks about the West being controlled by satanic pedophiles. In June, we have House of Cards have their fictional presidential character go to a dead-on knockoff of Bohemian Grove. And remember, it was Alex Jones who exposed that years ago, sneaking in there, photographing it. And I guess they based it off of Alex Jones' photographic records there. They have a cremation of care ceremony there, but it's an adult that they're killing. So we're going to get back to that because there's more to look at about what that tells us about the connections of Hollywood and about the inclinations of these people who are in power. But we're at the top of the hour here, and we've got a lot of our stations are on a news break. So for those stations, I want to do some news here, and then we'll get back to the main story, pick that up with our broadcasters in the next segment. Nancy Pelosi came out. I talked about this. She said she is a master legislator. She said, I'm a master legislator. I love it. I consider myself to be a weaver. I have a loom, and I bring all these different threads together. Yeah, you know, what a tangled web we weave when we first practice to deceive, as they say. And yes, it is a web. It is a net that people like this woman create that stifles our economy and traps us and takes away our liberty. That is exactly what it is like. I mean, you make an analogy here. She's like the crazy woman in Tale of Two Cities who's sitting there in the corner knitting and weaving. But yeah, she is like a spider trying to catch us in the net. Now, the good news is, and this is the great appointment, I think the best appointment that President Trump has made, and that's Scott Pruitt at EPA. And he points out that the Obama regulations were a war on business. That's exactly what Nancy Pelosi likes to create, likes to weave. She likes to create this suppressing web that is a war not only on business, but it's a war on freedom. More importantly, let's couch it in those terms. And it's a war on our ability to have a certain lifestyle that is supported by cheap energy. Understand that your quality of life is dependent upon cheap energy. Not only that, but your life expectancy. The quantity of your life is enhanced by cheap energy, and they want to take that away. This is an attack on you personally, individually, and your freedoms. And he points out, he says, in the past administration, this is the director of the EPA now, Scott Pruitt, he says they've declared war on coal, they've declared war on other industries, trying to take down entire segments of our economy. And he says in past administrations, they created tremendous uncertainty by adopting rules and regulations that were an overreach. Declaring war on any sector of our economy just doesn't make sense at all. But that's exactly what happened with the past administration. The past administration declared a war on coal and fossil fuels, despite the fact that those energy sources are tremendously important to us as a country, to generate electricity, to keep costs low, to provide stability for our citizens. Yes, a life that we want to live. That's what separates us from third world. That's why they want to turn us into a third world. That's their tactic. That's what Pelosi and Obama and others want to do. Now, we have seen a record surge in atmospheric CO2 in 2016. Does that frighten you? Well, it shouldn't, because even though, as the BBC reports, last year's increase was 50% higher than the average of the past 10 years, researchers say, oh, I see, this is humans. They're generating CO2. Yes, we do generate it. All animals do. It is a natural thing. CO2 is not a poison. It is not a toxin. It does not endanger us. And here's the cognitive dissonance for these people. While CO2 has been surging, the oceans continue to cool. Yes, whatsupwiththat.com reports that from the way media and climate scientists portray it, global air temperature, you would think that there's only one place to go, and that's straight to Hades. But no, it's cooling. We have cooling in the oceans, and they predominate. So there is no correlation to global warming, is there? We'll be right back. I'm David Knight.
And while these men here can't swing the votes of an entire nation, one measly state, well, that they can do. And that's why I'm here.
That was Kevin Spacey, his character on House of Cards, and that was just this last June that they recreated the scenes that Alex Jones broke into Bohemian Grove and filmed. But of course, they called it Elysium. But they still had a big altar with an owl-shaped head there. They had a cremation of care ceremony, but instead of burning a little child, which is a hearkening back to the child sacrifices to Moloch that they would do. Of course, if you go back to ancient civilizations, biblical times, they would have the celebrations of sexual promiscuity. And then as many of them would become pregnant with that, to the goddess of fertility, then they would have the child sacrifice for prosperity, paralleling what we now have with Planned Parenthood. So, you get pregnant from the celebration of fertility, and then you can get rid of your unwanted children for prosperity by sacrificing them to Moloch. And they recreate that. Our leaders, our captains of industry, our political leaders, they meet in a grove. They wear hoods like that. They don't let anybody in. And he says, it's invitation only, unless you invite yourself. That's exactly what Alex Jones did when he broke in there and filmed it. So they recreate that. And he is putting it right there in your face as to what they do. He said they carve up the world like a Sunday roast. This is where real power goes on. And that's why we cover Bilderberg and the other issues, the other places that they don't want to talk about. Of course, they do talk about Davos. They openly parade their power when they go to Davos. And they openly paraded Kevin Spacey. They called him the king of Davos. Remember, we played that for you yesterday. What did he do there? He was there to mock President Trump. And he said, well, the difference between the fictional president that I play on House of Cards and President Trump is that one is a fictional character and the other is a fictional character. Well, it turns out now that the face that was being presented to the world by Kevin Spacey was the real fictional character. We're now learning what that is. But it also brings up troubling issues about House of Cards because they have been very prescient about what was going to happen in American politics, haven't they? And they also were openly showing this Bohemian Grove. That raised a lot of eyebrows when they put that out there. Said, look at this. They're just bragging about this. Now, of course, they're now saying, even though everybody in Hollywood is saying, yeah, we all knew about Kevin Spacey, and they were doing cartoons about him 12 years ago with little kids running out saying, help me, I've just escaped from Kevin Spacey's basement. They said, we had no idea at House of Cards about this. We're going to cancel it because we don't want to be associated with this in any way. Let's cut this off real quickly before people start looking very closely at us and what we're doing. But of course, they're going to keep it going with some kind of a spinoff. Let me tell you something. All Hollywood knew. They don't have a problem with that. They're in your face about it, just like they're in your face about Bohemian Grove. And it's the places like Bohemian Grove and Bilderberg where they don't talk about what they're doing that are more important than the places where they do parade about what they're doing, like Davos. But he was very much a part of the inner establishment. That's why this article that came out in last April, 2 months even before they filmed that scene, before they released that scene, Vladimir Putin said the West is controlled by satanic pedophiles. I wanted to come back to this because I wanted to get more in depth about what he had to say. Back in April of this year, Putin said he remains firm on his original stance that the culture in the West is being manipulated by satanic pedophiles. He's exactly right about that. Can you question that based on what we have seen come out? And if you want to understand just how bad it is, take a look at the documentary, An Open Secret. An Open Secret. It's free. Take a look at it. Educate yourself about how we are being manipulated by satanic pedophiles. Prior to his recent meeting with Donald Trump at this year's G20 meeting, Putin issued a warning that if Trump didn't expose the elite pedophile networks, then Putin would begin naming names. He said, Europe and the West thrive on a culture of pedophilia and Satanism. Looking forward to following his meeting with Trump, though, Putin said that they had set the scene for a new era of cooperation on this, describing their talk as a breakthrough, as a huge step forward in the fight against the current satanic pedophile world order. Interesting, isn't it? We've had so many people busted recently. And we're not talking about just the big profile people. Again, there's been a lot of reports. This has happened several times. We've seen law enforcement officers busted as part of this. We've seen this extend to a lot of different areas. President Putin has previously highlighted Satanism and pedophilia as one of the main challenges that face contemporary Russia. He described the normalization of pedophilia as a clear sign of moral degradation creeping throughout Europe and the West. He said, we see many of the Euro-Atlantic countries are actually rejecting their roots, rejecting their Christian values that constitute the basis of Western civilization. The excesses of political correctness have reached the point where people are seriously talking about registering political parties whose aim is to promote pedophilia. And understand, we're not that far away from it. Take a look at the race that's happening in Virginia today. We've got a transgender candidate there. And you've got the NPR stations and Washington Post furious about the fact that the GOP outed this person as a man because Danica Rome, or however you pronounce his name, is putting himself out as a woman. But they're saying, no, it's a guy dressed as a woman. And then they get upset about this. And NPR says, wait a minute, this person has been unfairly attacked. Danica Rome may be the very first transgender candidate, writes the Washington Post, but she's also the first one who has been misgendered. I'm sorry, that was the NPR that's saying that. The first candidate to be misgendered. I would say misgendered. This is a man who has misgendered, gendered himself. That's what's really going on. And what they're just saying is, look, if you think you're voting for a woman, you're not. You're voting for a man who's dressed as a woman. Let's be honest about this. If this guy is going to lie to you about something as basic as that, what else is he going to lie to you about? And so they're just being honest with people. But then, of course, the Democrats, the NPR, the Washington Post, they turn this around and say, this is horrible. A new campaign mailer paid for by the Republican Party of Virginia repeatedly refers to Danica Rome, R-O-E-M, I don't know how to pronounce the name, a transgender woman, no, a transgender man, a man dressed as a woman, seeking election to the state of House of Delegates as a man, accuses her of making her identity part of the race. Well, of course she has. You know, don't talk about me being a transgender, but when she talks to another group, she says, I'm your first transgender candidate. See how that goes? She wants it both ways. In so many different ways, right? This is the person when I'm a man over here, but I'm a woman over here, and then I'm a transgender when I speak to that group, taking it in every direction. And of course, we see the same thing happening with the identity politics of the Democrat candidate for governor in Virginia. This is a guy who's making campaign ads showing rednecks and pickup trucks with Ku Klux Klan stuff and saying, oh, look, they got Confederate flags, trying to play that card with certain groups. But then when he goes into conservative areas, he's got a lieutenant governor who's running with him who's black, and he removes the black man from his flyer when he goes into the conservative areas. So he says one thing to one group and another thing to another group, just like this guy who's wearing a dress. That's what happens from the liars who play identity politics. When are we going to throw them out of office? I'm David Knight. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You know, it's Halloween today, and there's no question that many of parts of our country have already entered wintertime. Some of the northern climates already have a great deal of snow has fallen. But we know that it's on the way, and that's why we have put on sale Winter Sun and Silver Bullet. Winter Sun is our vitamin D supplement, and Silver Bullet is our colloidal silver. Both of those are very effective in this time of year when we see a rise in the number of cold and flu. A lot of people can tell you about how dangerous the flu vaccine is. Even people who are cheerleaders for vaccine usage, like, what's his name, Mayor, who does Politically Correct. Even he says, hey, I would stay away from the flu vaccine stuff. That's bad stuff. And you see the people who brag about it and say, look, we're going to take a flu vaccine. You wind up seeing them later on getting very, very sick because, you know, from your own personal experience, you've seen that happen as well. But you've seen it with celebrities who try to push flu vaccines. There's better ways to do it. There's ways to make your immune system healthier, as well as to fight infections without having any adverse side effects. Silver has always been very effective in terms of fighting infection. It is something that has been used since ancient times, and it's also still currently used to fight infections. Still very effective. And so colloidal silver, our Silver Bullet product, is available at 50% off, and so is Winter Sun, our vitamin D supplement. And of course, we talk about that because it's very well known that a lack of sunlight takes down your vitamin D production. And so people who are during winter, as they see a decrease in their mood, as they see some people have pointed out, it's a seasonal affective disorder. They call it SAD. Happens when people experience a low mood during winter months because they don't get much light or sunshine. This is not just being depressed because you're staying indoors. This is having a depressed mood because of physiological factors, because of a vitamin D deficiency. And they've also found in a double-blind placebo, they found that randomized clinical trial that was published just last year in the Journal of Medicine found that vitamin D supplementation significantly improved fatigue levels. So it has a lot of different things that are very important. It helps you to helps to boost your immune system. It helps to boost your mood. It helps to fight fatigue that many people suffer from that is chronic. It also helps your body to assimilate calcium and other things if you're trying to fight osteoporosis. And so you can get that right now, 50% off at InfoWarsStore.com. And you can get 16% off our vitamin mineral fusion drink with the code VITA10. That's VITA 10. Now 16% off vitamin mineral fusion drink mix. It's a great way to get vitamin and mineral supplementation, a wide variety of supplements, without taking a lot of pills. And that's now 16% off with the code at checkout, VITA10. There's something that's been happening that we haven't paid much attention to, and that is we have Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Defense Secretary Mattis going before the Senate and saying that they need to have the authorization for the use of military force that was put in place in 2001 that gave them worldwide authority, they said, to declare war anywhere at any time. And now people are saying, wait a minute, we don't like the way that this looks. And they're saying, well, if you decide to pass a new authorization for the use of military force, it should be unlimited in time and geographic reach. Tillerson said yesterday that the Congress should not time constrain their ability to conduct war, and it must not be geographically restricted. There you go. Just in case you didn't understand, we have an American empire that wants to go to war perpetually, anywhere, at any time, without making a reason for it, without getting the authorization of Congress. And Rand Paul had this to say.
That administrations, Republican and Democrat, come to us and say they believe in unlimited Article II power to execute war. What should surprise and worry us, though, is that it seems like they also argue that they have virtually unlimited power to initiate and to execute war. And that's where the real problem comes here. I'm pretty much like everybody else. Execute the war. I don't want to have you restrained to rules of engagement. I want to engage and kill the enemy. But initiation of the war was given to us. Madison wrote that the executive branch is the branch most prone to war, and therefore with studied care we gave that power to the legislature. And so while some would argue, well, we can just not appropriate money, that becomes very difficult. Even in Vietnam, nobody wanted to cut off the money because no one wants to be accused of not giving money to soldiers in the field. So our real only chance of preventing war is not to initiate the war. The problem we have with you coming forward to us and saying, my goodness, you will not even tell us that we're not going to have preventative war or preemptive war with North Korea. This sends a signal, not just that we're willing to do first strike, but what signal does it send to enemies of other nuclear powers, enemies of Russia, enemies of China, enemies of Pakistan, of India, that we're reserving the right, if we don't like what weapon you have and we think it might reach us, we may as well just take you out. I mean, look, Pakistan and India are pointed at each other. You got Israel pointed at Saudi Arabia, pointed at Iran. You have all of these enemies, and if we're going to assert that, yes, we have the right and the will, and we will take preemptive war against a nuclear power, I think that's very troublesome. But if we want to fix it, we should fix it. You know, we complain, administrations want to take to power, we should reassert our power. It's not just us. It's been generation after generation of Congress just acquiescing in this. And while I applaud the AUMF that's being put forward as asserting our authority, if it doesn't limit the authority of the executive, I'm not sure we're a lot better. My problem, the executive branch thinks it's too restrictive.
All right, let's hold it there. He is wound up, and he goes on for a full 7 minutes. And he is absolutely, totally right. You don't want to pull resources away from a war from the soldiers who are in the field once it's started. And so once they get this thing started, you can't stop it. The question is, are we going to do this the right way? Are we going to make sure that we have a goal in mind, that we have a definition of what winning is? Are we going to do it according to the Constitution? Does the rule of law matter anymore? And, of course, he's also right about the fact that Congress has abdicated its authority on this. We say, well, we don't care. Let the president decide. We'll just let him get us into a war wherever. That needs to stop. But there's another aspect of this that is even more troubling, and that is when Tillerson and Mattis say that the president doesn't have permission from Congress to attack North Korea, but it doesn't matter. He doesn't need it because they've got nuclear weapons. Do you understand how dangerous that is? That's what Rand Paul was addressing there. The assertion from Tillerson and Mattis that the mere possession of nuclear weapons is all the president needs to launch a first strike. What would have happened during the Cold War if we had had that kind of an attitude, right? That would have been very, very, very concerning. And that's the issue that we have right now. We have to have this discussion, and we have to get back to a position where we are deliberate about it, where we discuss the purpose of war, where we come at it from the standpoint of a just war. You know, today is the 500th anniversary of the beginning of the Reformation. So when Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of a cathedral in Wittenberg. We need to always be reforming our institutions, whether they are political or religious. They always need to be examined. We always need to be going back to what was the purpose of this organization. What is the purpose of the American government? Is it to be an empire? Is it to be the world's policeman? Or is it to maintain the liberty and the safety and security of Americans? Is that served by these unending wars everywhere that we don't even bother to get authorization for? That we don't even bother to make the Christian statement of, is this a just war or not? No, we don't care about just wars. We just want war. That's what we're seeing from the deep state. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. It's Halloween. I'm David Knight, and of course, playing the old themes from the Universal Monster movies, as I pointed out last week. You know, it was all in good fun. But things have taken a turn for the worse, haven't they, in film? I remember when I used to enjoy all the old Universal Monster movies, the mummy who is slowly chasing people, dragging one foot behind him. It's like, oh, okay, that's kind of creepy, but of course he couldn't catch me type of thing. But then it turned kind of dark, didn't it? Then they started doing films that were from the perspective of the killer. And then they started getting very graphic about it. You know, quite frankly, as I get older, I don't take any joy in death or dismemberment. I don't want to see that graphically portrayed. It's just too real. I understand it really happens, and I don't like to see it. I don't see it as a fantasy that I enjoy, and I don't identify with the killers. And so it's taken a very dark turn, like so much in our society has. You know, we had Vladimir Putin saying last April that the West is ruled by elite satanic pedophiles. Talking about that. And when I look at that, I think about Halloween. I don't want to be a politically correct killjoy here. And I know that you can celebrate, you can dress up in all these costumes. And again, you dress in any costume that you want. I don't care. I've had these people saying, oh, don't dress as a Disney Hawaiian princess if you're not Hawaiian, because you're culturally appropriating her, and it's inappropriate to do that. And you got people attacking the statue of Teddy Roosevelt. So I guess they'd attack you if you're dressed as Teddy Roosevelt or whatever. They're pulling down statues everywhere. Or if you really want to get people PO'd, you can dress up like white privilege. The guy with a crown and privilege across, he's all white content and got his face painted white. So, yeah, fine. You want to dress like a white person? Go ahead. You know, we never meant it as an attack on Indians. The schools that I used to go to, when I went to junior high school, we were the Warriors. And then the school that just right down the street from it, they were the Chiefs. And there was a respect for that. I mean, in Florida, they had the Seminoles, Florida State University. And people got all ticked off about that. And the Seminole tribe said, wait a minute, we consider that to be an honor. We don't want you to change the name. And we never meant it as a dishonor. And we dressed as Indians in the groups and so forth and had the mascots. It was never a dishonor. I find it dishonoring when you've got parents like the ones in Chapel Hill who are saying, we want a Halloween without any costumes that have guns or anything. It's like, this is like Toy Story. I love the Toy Story films. I thought they were great. Very sentimental, very sweet. groundbreaking in so many different ways, but they took the gun away from the sheriff. Come on, it's like, we saw that agenda, and that used to always tick me off. Still does when I think about it. So, I don't want to be a killjoy on the other side about this stuff, but when I look at it and we think about the fact that the world is ruled by elite satanic pedophiles, and what does Halloween say for us? And we got our kids going door to door on this dark day where everybody is dressing up like ghouls and goblins and devils and so forth. They're going door to door, getting candy from people. I mean, is this modeling pedophilia or what? So, I mean, there's other ways to celebrate it, and you can certainly do it in a way that just be understanding about what you're doing. And, when we look at situations like this elementary school canceling it because they say, well, we're just going to call it Black and Orange Spirit Day. I mean, it's like, well, all right. As a Christian, maybe I don't want to participate in that. Maybe I would rather celebrate the 500th anniversary of the Reformation as a Christian or whatever. I mean, do your own thing, right? But think about what you're doing with people. And when we go back and we look at the old horror stories, one of the themes about it, and this is something that's been talked about by Reuters in a special report, the market for human bodies. And it was always a theme in the old Universal stories. It began with Frankenstein, where they would go in and they would dig up bodies for scientific research, and not everybody stitched them together and tried to reanimate them. There were a lot of movies about the body snatchers. They'd sometimes call them resurrectionists because they would dig up these bodies. It was forbidden to experiment on human bodies, but as they point out, there's some legitimate reasons that medical professionals need to have human bodies. They simply cannot simulate this with an artificial body, the types of things that they need to do as even, say, an anesthesiologist. They need to be able to get the tactile feeling of operating on a body. It's very important for the medical community to be able to do that. So we understand that. But then there's this weird trade in bodies that nobody knows about. Now, when Reuters reports on it, they want it regulated. Maybe they need to regulate it, but maybe they just need to explain to people what's going on. Because they begin the story about this Southern Nevada donor services, and they offered grieving families a way to eliminate expensive funeral costs and free cremation in exchange for donating a loved one's body to advance medical studies. But outside of their suburban warehouse, they said the circumstances were far from comforting. In the fall of 2015, neighboring tenants began to complain about a mysterious stench and body boxes that they found in a dumpster. Health inspectors found a man in medical scrubs holding a garden hose. He was thawing a frozen human torso in the midday sun. As he sprayed the remains, bits of tissue and blood were washed into the gutters, said a state health report. Now, they didn't have anything to charge the guy with except some minor pollution issues. And then it talks about the market for transplants. They say thousands of Americans donate their bodies in the belief that they're contributing to science, but it's a largely unregulated and unknown business. And they bring in some parallels to organ donations. And there was a story just a couple of weeks ago about a man who was blocked from giving his kidney to his son because he had violated his parole. And so all these people were volunteering to give it. And we've had a lot of people talk about how the organ shortage could be solved if we would allow some compensation for the people who are doing the donation. It wouldn't necessarily create a bad issue, a situation where people are selling off body parts or getting body parts illicitly. As a matter of fact, I think it would actually cut down on that market. We have to understand that there is a thriving market in body parts coming out of China. They will take prisoners, many of them who've been in prison just because of their religious beliefs, and they will harvest their organs and sell them in a black market. Why? Because we don't allow a real market, an open market, to exist. So when you prohibit something and there is a demand for it, you're going to get a black market, and it's going to look much, much worse than any market that would be regulated. So I think that's one of the takeaways from this. If you would allow people to get some compensation for donating bodies, then that would help to alleviate the supply. And you would have not a situation where some of these dodgy individuals are saying, we'll give you a free burial for your loved ones because you don't have any money, and then they make thousands of dollars off of donating this. Let the people who are making the donations get a little bit of money out of that. Let the people who are donating organs get a little bit of money out of that. When you think about a situation where there is an accident and people are confronted with this, and they still haven't been able to accept the fact that their loved one is dead, and then people are asking for body parts. At least in some cases, I have to believe that if there was some compensation that would be shared, because, of course, the hospitals are going to make a lot of money off of this. The doctors are going to make a lot of money off of this, but you are expected to donate that without any compensation at all. And that's part of where the bottleneck in parts come in. And as I say, when they look at these bodies, yes, you do need to have a market here. Surgeons say they can't get this experience simply with a mannequin. I think it's a lesson that we need to understand when we look at drug prohibition. We just had Jeff Sessions say that they're going to crack down on medical marijuana growers, even in states that have legalized it. This is in an interview that he had with Hugh Hewitt. And he said, a lot of states, said Hewitt, a lot of states are simply breaking the law. And a lot of money is being made and banked, said Hugh Hewitt. This is why I don't call myself a conservative, that attitude. And he said, just one RICO prosecution of one producer and the banks that serviced him would shut all this down. And Sessions said, well, I don't think it would be that easy, but you have to understand that this is a violation of the current federal laws, and they are in defiance of that. You know what would shut down the war on drugs is if we had an attorney general like Jeff Sessions who actually enforced the Constitution instead of an illegal war on drugs that violated the Constitution, violated the 10th Amendment and the 9th Amendment. That would shut down the war on drugs. You wouldn't do RICO statute prosecution. That would shut it down. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're going to take a look at another horror story that has come out of Syria as we have taken out the headquarters of ISIS, the Caliphate's headquarters in Raqqa. I'm going to get to that in just a moment. Before we do, real quickly, I want to remind you of the sales that we have at InfoWarsStore.com. We still have 50% off BrainForce Plus, and we have 30% off Super Male Vitality, some of our most popular products. And as I've mentioned before, BrainForce Plus is my favorite supplement because it focuses my mind. It helps my recall. Also, we have Anthroplex, 50% off. Silver Bullet and Winter Sun, as I've been telling you, are both now 50% off. Kind of, I guess you could say, our winter sale. Vitamin D supplement, Winter Sun, 50% off. And Silver Bullet, our colloidal silver, is also 50% off. And we have 16% off of Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix. A great way to take your essential vitamins and minerals without having to swallow a lot of pills. It's a great tasting drink mix, or you can mix anything that you want to with it. And don't have to swallow a lot of pills. You can get 16% off right now with the code at checkout, VITA10. That's VITA 10. It was 10% off last week, and we've increased that now to 16% off for Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix at checkout when you enter the code VITA10. I was talking in the last segment about this series of investigative reports being done by Reuters, talking about, hey, in the market for human bodies, almost anyone can sell the dead. Well, that sounds very Halloweenish, sounds very sensational. Look, the reality is that when we talk about organ donors and we talk about body donors, the operative term here is donors. Why do they say donors? Because the people who give up their organs, the people who give up the bodies of their loved ones for medical science are not getting a cent. See, what's being hidden from the public is the fact that a few people are making a great deal of money off of this. The vast amounts of money that are being made off of these, especially off of organ donations. And by hiding that, they can keep a lot of that money. They don't have to share it with the donors or the donor families. And so they can keep all the money for themselves. And then what that does is that creates a shortage that many times will cost people's lives if they can't get the organs that they need. And it also creates a very dangerous black market. That's what prohibition always does. And so the solution to this is not to sensationalize it, not to regulate it and still keep it as free, but to let people know what is going on and to give people financial incentives to participate in this. And no matter, you're never going to have a perfect solution. Yes, some people will abuse it, but it is not to the extent that it is being abused now. And understand that where it is coming from when you see these exhibits like Body in Motion and stuff. I mean, they're getting, the plasticized bodies. Just look into where that is coming from. And some of the stories that have come out about that, donated bodies having bullet holes. I mean, we know that this is coming from executed prisoners in many cases. But I want to talk about now something else that has come out that has a very Halloweenish title. Secrets of the Black Stadium inside ISIS's House of Horror. And this is something that came out of the Daily Beast a little while ago. Let's give a little bit of a background effect here. The municipal stadium was always called the Black Stadium, even when it was a soccer stadium, because of the concrete construction. But once ISIS took over, it took on a whole new meaning. It became an arena for horror for the ISIS state. What they did was they used this soccer stadium as a prison, as an execution site, as a torture site. And as some of the people who were living in that area said, before we would play football matches, before it came under the control of ISIS. It was used as a prison. 80% of the people that were imprisoned here were killed, he says. In the locker rooms, the showers, the gym beneath the stadium, they created cells and torture chambers for their feared security arm known as the Omni. You can still find graffiti written by prisoners and fighters. Some of it is in Russian, some of it is in Arabic, and some of it is in English. And if you're reading it, they say, they put on in English, they said, if you're reading this, there's 4 main reasons why you're here. Number 1, you did the crime and you were caught red-handed. Number 2, using Twitter, instead of Twitter, using Twitter or GPS locations, or having GPS locations even switched on your phone. They'd throw you in jail. They would imprison you. They say also uploading photos and videos from sensitive Wi-Fi internet locations. Or you might just be a suspect off of the street, and the police have a good reason for doing this. So it doesn't matter whether you did it or not. This is what's written on the wall. It doesn't matter whether you did it or not. The ISIS police have a good reason to bring you here. Yeah, if we even suspect you, you're going to be here in prison, and we're going to torture you. We're going to execute you. One of the individuals himself was arrested several times. He said he spent 5 days there. He said, I couldn't talk to anyone. They were hitting people with tires. They were hanging people from the roof. People from Tunisia were responsible for the torturing. In the prison beneath the stadium, we see iron cables, plastic straps used to tie people down. Other reporters have come across primitive exercise machines that were turned into bloodied instruments of torture. And there's still the smell of human death. So many of these people, they had flyers going around saying they were still there. They said they're covered with deaths, but they show the many punishments that they would carry out for spying, for homosexuality, and for theft. And of course, that is the crime that ISIS was shutting down. Now, we have seen the collapse of the caliphate, their physical location. And of course, Raqqa has been thoroughly destroyed with this. And when we look at the real monsters that we need to be worried about in the U.S., I think we need to pull up a picture of that monster who is currently still in the U.S. Senate. One of the good things about the fact that we still have John McCain with us, I think, in my opinion, is that he is able to, there he is, there's the guy. That was deliberately set up on Time Magazine where they lit him underneath, right? You've seen that picture even if you're not getting the video feed. The picture of John McCain lit from below, just like a Universal monster. Universal Studios monster. But he is a Universal monster. I guess you could call him a globalist monster. And the shadow behind him. That's a shadow government behind him. Yeah, that's the kind of guy that he is. And I think the good thing is, I'm glad that he was around to see the failure of his regime change. Now, there was an interesting document that came out. Mint Press talks about it. They say The Intercept published a document that came out of the Ed Snowden leaks 3 years ago. They just published this. And they said, if they would have put this out sooner, we could have seen far less death and destruction in the Syrian war. They say on Tuesday, this will be last Tuesday, The Intercept published a hitherto unknown document from the trove of the NSA documents leaked by Ed Snowden over 3 years ago. This is coming from Mint Press News. They say the document was notable as it shed light on the early days of the Syrian conflict and the fact that for the past 6 years, so many so-called revolutionary groups aimed at toppling the Syrian regime of Assad have largely acted as proxies for foreign governments pushing regime change. Now, of course, we knew that. We've been saying that all along. It isn't any secret that John McCain and the so-called moderate rebels that he's been meeting with are radicals, that their whole purpose has been regime change. I mean, we were even told that years before this happened, that there was a list. Remember, General Clark said that. He said, we got a list of people that we're going to take out. And, of course, Syria was on the list. And this is a war that was fought for regime change. It was a war that was brought in by outsiders who wanted to do the same thing to Syria that they had done to Libya. But the point is that if we had seen this document, anything that we can point to as a document can help to shut that down. And what the document shows is that the Free Syrian Army had informed the U.S. government of what they were going to be doing, and they were working very closely with Saudi Prince Salman bin Sultan, the guy who is the right-hand man of the CIA. He's always there in Washington, and that goes back to our petrodollar alliance, but the fact that the CIA and the Saudi intelligence agencies are indistinguishable from each other. He had ordered the FSA to light up Damascus, to flatten the city's civilian airport, and it cost at least 60 lives. But the implication of this document that was not released is significant, they say, because it offers the clearest proof in the form of official U.S. government documents that detail direct relationships between the armed Syrian opposition and the foreign governments. You know, the people that monster John McCain was meeting with? See, that's the death and destruction that is unnecessary that he leaves in his wake. And then they take The Intercept to task for saying that they inaccurately claimed that it didn't cause any casualties, but did. It caused 60 people to die. Secondly, they state that the 2011 uprising in Syria was organic. It wasn't. It was engineered. And the largest oversight of all is to fail to mention the U.S.'s role in funding this and their complicity in this because of the documents that they have. And so this is how this happens. And if you think this is over, understand that the Saudis are now planting the seeds of radical Wahhabism now back there in Raqqa. So it hasn't ended. There's just a different sect, a different murderous sect there. And if you think the Saudi Arabia is somehow turning into a modern state, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that will be allowed to happen, even if this crown prince is sincerely wanting to do it. Stay with us. I'm David Knight.